Please mute all. All right, cool. I think we're ready. So today I'm going to try to live code this as much as I can get done of this HTTP authentication module. This module is meant to be, it's a benchmark, right? Yeah, it's meant to put into practice just how the basics of authentication work on the web. So the quick overview is in HTTP is a stateless protocol. And what that means is that each HTTP request knows nothing about the previous HTTP requests. So when you build a large-scale web application, you often have tens or sometimes hundreds of app servers that all are on deck to respond to any web request. So if you hit Google, one of thousands of servers are going to receive that request and respond to it. So none of those servers can, it's inefficient for all of those servers to have to save state about the previous HTTP request. So since all requests don't know anything about the previous state, and we need something like authentication, we need some persistence, we need some state between your, throughout your web requests as an individual users. So we use cookies to build state on top of HTTP. And so cookies are, they're actually just an HTTP header that the server can set. And what it tells the browser, so if you make a request to a website for the very first time, that website can, in its response, put a set cookie header that says, remember this string, essentially. And there's some other options for like how long it lives and expiration time and stuff. And so it'll give us some string. That can be any string, and the browser's going to hold on to it. And any requests I make in the future, I'm going to send that header as part of my cookie header. So what that basically means is you can picture like a restaurant where people are coming in and taking orders, and I don't know who anybody is. So when you ask me for an order, I'm going to give you a number, and every time you talk to me again, you have to show me that number so I know who you are. So I know what orders you've done in the past, what's the state of things, and I basically tag everybody with a unique ID. And that's what we're going to build, is that unique ID and how to do that in a secure way to build sessions on top of HTTP. Cool. So let's get into it. Does that make sense? Any questions about that? So let's see. Cool. So I'm going to npm init-y. What? Oh, okay. It doesn't like this directory name. Huh. I've never had npm do this before. Why care? Okay. Good with that? Great. All right, so we've got our package JSON. I'm gonna get init here in case you want to make some commits. Great, and I'm gonna npm install express. And I think I'm gonna also install cookie. I'm also going to use Pug. Everybody here has used Pug before? Yeah, sweet. It's like EJX, but it's a white space sensitive alternate syntax to HTML. It's a little wonky, but once you get used to it, it's actually really nice. I think it makes much more sense than HTML not being space or white space sensitive. All right, so we got an app.js, and here we go, app.js. right. I think that's all we need to start our little app. So we'll get a second thing here. And we'll do node app.js. And we're started on 3000. And no default engine. That's right. Express Pug. Forgot. Oh, man. This is not a useful page.
Isn't it like app.engine?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do app set or you can do app.engine.
I was hoping to just copy it because I'm lazy. Here we go. App.engine Pug. I think that's all you need to do. And then we need a views directory and index.pug. And we'll just say hello from Pug. And instead of node app.js, node mon app.js, npm, npm install, let's just say dev node mon. Man, that takes forever.
What is the difference between save and save?
Ah, yeah. Anybody know?
It saves the devs dependency.
Yes, it does. So, in applications have you can have a bunch of different kinds of dependencies, but the main difference here is we've got dependencies that the application needs no matter what, and then we've got dependencies that it only needs when you're developing. So we only need Mocha to run tests while we're developing. We don't need that in production, so it's a dev dependency. I'm only going to run NodeMon while I'm developing. It's a dev dependency, and it puts it in a different spot in your package JSON.
Oh, okay.
Callback required. I swear that's all you had to do.
You can import Pug.
Maybe not. I don't think you do. Express bug. There must be a better page.
Why don't you just say app.set and then in quotes put UNG?
Yeah. I just didn't know what it was. You have it memorized. I don't. Yeah. I'm lazy. I like to copy and paste things. Good job memorizing that. I'm too lazy. Okay, there we go. Sweet. And we're up. Hello from Pug. Okay, great. Cool. So if we open the developer tools and we look at our network tab here, I'm going to say preserve log. And am I filtering for some reason? I am. Okay. So cool. So when I make this request, the response headers are pretty small. There's not much going on in there. But when we make a cookie, I'll show you how it adds an additional header here.
Make the response headers larger.
Oh yeah. Is that easier to read? Like that? Huh? Okay. Cool. So let's start with something simple. Did I install a cookie? No. I think it's cookie that I want.
Cookie session.
I don't want cookie session. I'm not ready for that. Cookie session's going to do this work for us, and I want to do it by hand so you can see how it works. So I just want cookie because I don't want to parse any cookies. That's a big pain and it's hard, and it's not exactly something that I don't know. I hope you never have to do it by hand. Great, so I can get cookie, and I can just do cookie serialize and all kinds of stuff here. So let's try that. Great. So should have cookie now. I will go get me some cookie. And let's make let's do something here. So let's see. Serialize name. Okay, so here is a way for us to set a cookie. and we'll call this session. And for now, we're just going to put fake session. And then here are the options. HTTP only. This basically this decides whether or not the cookie is accessible from JavaScript on the page for security reasons. So I'm going to put HTTP only so that even my own JavaScript on my own page can't read this cookie. It's only for the server. And then this is just how long it's going to live for. So let's see when I reload this page if we get, there we go, cool. So we got a set cookie and it just says session equals fake session. So now next time I can actually grab the content of that cookie somewhere. Saw it in here. Request headers cookie. Okay, great. So let's parse these. And I'm just going to send this straight to the view and just dump it out so we can see what's in there. So in the view here, I'm going to make a pre-tag, and then I'm going to use JSON stringify cookies. And let's make it big. We'll see what we get here. Cool. So we got session, fake session. Yeah? So I set this cookie when you made a request, and I'm also able to view the cookie. So let's make a simple little page where when you come to the site for the first time, if we don't know what your name is, we'll ask you for your name. And then if we've got a cookie that stores your name in it, we'll just display that, right? So we're going to first look and see if we've got a cookies.name. And if we know that, then we don't need to ask you for it. So we'll just say, so your name is cookies name. And then we'll say name. And then in here, we'll say if there's a name, and we'll just say name, else we'll provide a form with an input. And another input, type submit. And this form is going to go to /set-name. That's irrelevant. I'm just making that up. This is just this could be any route, and then the method will be a post. Thank you. Okay, cool. So let's see if we load this and it doesn't know our name. Cool. So then let's make this route, the set name route. And it's going to come in as request. Oh, I need a body parser in order to do this. Body parser. Because I'm doing a post, so the data is going to come in as a post body. So I need a body parser. So, I do. Did I forget to save cookie? No, I didn't. Okay, so we get body parser. And I think we just say app.use body parser something. But I'll just look it up because I never remember. Here we go. URL encoded is fine. So now we have a body parser. Okay. So here, I'm not sure what I'm going to get yet. So a little trick I like to do is when I'm making a new route where I'm going to be posting some data to it, before I use that data, I'll just do a console, or not console, I'll do a response.json for the request body and just make sure that the data I'm sending works. And so it actually isn't going to work because I forgot a name. So the name of this field is confusingly called name. Is that confusing anyone? Does that make sense? Name, a little weird, but not that crazy. Okay. And I broke everything because I just have like a slash hanging out there. Thank you. All right, so great. So it got a good set of params, right? We got name, Jared, right? So now we know that in this route, I can just do request.body.name. So we'll just grab that. And then we're going to write a cookie. We're going to write the name cookie, and then we're just going to redirect to the home page. So we're going to say set cookie, cookie serialize, the name cookie with your name. And then we'll say response.redirect to the home page. And now it should say welcome back me. So I'll reload this page. And I do Jared, and I hit submit, and then it says welcome back Jared. And if I reload this page, it keeps showing that because it's got my cookie. So we can see that in a couple of places. So when I load this page now, you can see in the request headers, I have a cookie with 2 cookies in it. I have a cookie header, and the cookie header is just a big long string that can contain multiple cookies. In this case, it's got our old session, fake session cookie, and then it's got name equals Jared. So 2 cookies going on in here. Another way you can see this is if you go to the application tab in Chrome, you can go to cookies, select this domain, and we can see that there is some other information here, but we've got 2 cookies here, right? We can also just clear our cookies for this domain, and now I'm back to not having that, right? So then I can come in here and give a different name, and then I now have that cookie set, right? So this is the backbone. This is the simple first layer of adding state to HTTP as a stateless protocol. Yeah? So you can store any string you want in cookies, and cookies are what the web uses to like track who you are. The fact that when you go to Amazon and you look at a pressure cooker and then you go to Facebook and now you see ads for pressure cookers, like that's because Amazon gave you a cookie that Facebook can read and has information about it, and they're probably talking to each other in the back end somehow, and a lot of ad tracking activity is all based on cookies. So if you install plugins into your browser that help you like be less trackable, most of the time they're just deleting cookies that are being given to you because those cookies are not helpful to you. They're only helpful to ad agencies, right? So let's check this out. What if I go into this cookie and I just change it to Peter? And I reload the page. You can see that I have control over the content of these cookies, right? Which means if we were to throw like a user ID in there after you log in, someone could just go change that user ID and we can become someone else, right? So there's an extra layer that needs to happen here where I need to not just give you a number when you make an order at this restaurant analogy I keep using, right? Because you could just effectively erase that number and write your own number and be like, oh, I'm next, right? So, and I won't know that you forged that thing. There's no way to verify. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a number, but I'm going to encrypt it using a one-way hashing algorithm so that you don't have the technological means to produce a new other value for your cookie that would yield that I could use to it's actually not going to be a one-way hashing algorithm. I apologize. It's going to be a two-way. It's going to be unencryptable, but you won't be able to unencrypt it, and you won't be able to encrypt a new one. So you won't be able to change the content that's in there in a way that I will accept. You could change the value of your cookie, but I'm going to get that string and I'm going to try to decrypt it, and it's not going to be a valid decryptable string. So let's do the encryption part, and we're going to use Bcrypt. Bcrypt. And let's figure out how to set this up. So we need Bcrypt. And to hash a password. Well, actually, Bcrypt isn't going to be great for this because it actually is a one-way hashing algorithm, right? So Bcrypt is commonly used for passwords where we store, like you give us your password and we encrypt it using a one-way hashing algorithm, and that means it can't be undone. We can't get from the result back to the original input. It only goes one way. And so we store that in a database, and we don't store your actual password. And then when you go to log in, you give us your password again, and we use that same one-way hashing algorithm, and then we check that the results are the same. But the reason why that gives us additional security is because we have a database full of hashed passwords. And if someone stole our database, they wouldn't be able to get from those hashes to your password and log into your account. They can't go back. It's one way. So we'll use that if we have time to get to the password portion of this. But I need a two-way encryption library. We'll use crypto. We'll try this. This looks like some off-the-shelf stuff I can just use. So, as an example, and if it's not clear, the reason I'm doing this by hand is just to illustrate what's going on. We could just drop in cookie session and it would do this for us, right? So this is just to illustrate how all the pieces are working.
Cookie session does encryption.
I believe so, yeah. Great. So we have an encrypt and a decrypt method. Let's see if this works. I'm just gonna, we need crypto. And I'm just gonna run node and paste all this code in here, and then let's do encrypt, hello world. And then decrypt. Let me get back hello world. Great, cool. So these two things here, this password thing, I would normally not store this in my code, right? Because this is going to get shipped to GitHub, and maybe it'll even be open source, right? So this I will want to hide somewhere in like a .m file, but I'm going to leave it here for now. So this encrypt and decrypt is using some encryption stuff that I don't fully understand, but I kind of know how it works, but I don't know how it actually works. But is there any questions about this, or can we move forward with just the fact that we now have the ability to encrypt and decrypt?
Where did you do that?
I just Googled for node two-way encryption and found Chris Rock's blog, lollyrock.com, and he was like, I heard you like encryption, brah, and then, cool. Cool. Okay, great. So now let's encrypt the name header here. So if you give us a name, we are going to encrypt that name, and that'll be the value of our cookie. And then if we have a name, then we are going to set name, we're going to decrypt name. So let's do it this way, actually. We're just going to say name. If name in cookies, then decrypt cookie name, otherwise null. Great. So name equals, if we've got a name cookie, the decrypted name, otherwise null. And we might get a decryption error. Yeah, bad input string. So let's catch this. So, now I got to put it back. Oh my God.
Is there a way to do that in a ternary function or in a ternary?
Maybe, but it's starting to become unreadable in my opinion. So great. So we get the name value, and if there is a value in there, we try to decrypt it. If not, we set name to null and assignment to a constant. That's because this should be a constant. This should be a let. Here we go. All right. Cool. Does that make sense? How I'm catching that error and just ignoring it? Like if we can't decrypt your cookie, then it's probably a bad cookie, so we're just going to ignore it. We might even put something in here to delete the name cookie because we know it's bad. Right? Cool. So now we'll come in here and we'll say Jared, and it says welcome back Jared, and we look at our cookie, and our cookie is now this crazy old string. So I can reload the page and we still get Jared. If I go incognito, right, it doesn't know because incognito doesn't have my cookies, right? Whole point of incognito. So now I can come in here and I can try to change this to something else, reload the page. Oh, wow. Okay, this might not be the best. This might not be the best encryption algorithm. I'm not sure what do we change this? I got nothing. All right. This is probably, yeah. The second part of this article is probably like, and here's why this solution sucks. I'm sure that there's some stronger encryption that we can do at some point, but I'm gonna let y'all imagine that.
So what kind of result would you expect to see?
I would expect this result. This can't be good, right? I'd expect this result. To just this would fail. It would say bad input. We would just ignore that, and then we'd go back to assuming we don't know who you are.
Can we look at the console after you do that?
This console?
It won't.
There's nothing in this console. Yeah, you mean to console log this error?
Or like, it won't show it at all?
No, but even if I were to log this error, so let's say error decrypting cookie, and here's the error, that's going to be in the terminal here, right? Because this is running on the quote unquote server, right? So clear this. I'll give myself a new cookie. Go into application, cookies, mess this cookie up, and then reload. And we should have seen, yeah, error decrypting cookie, type error, bad input string, right? So, so we got that. Yeah? Cool. So now storing the name is great, but it's and maybe that's good enough because maybe all we need to store in your session is your user ID. But we probably want to store more than that, right? So instead of storing name, we want to store like an entire object so we can put whatever stuff in it that we want, right? So if we need to store an object's worth of information and we need to store that as a string, what can we use to turn an object into a string? Two-string? No, that's not going to be good enough. Oh, JSON stringify. Yeah, stringify is not a thing on its own. Yeah, so JSON stringify, right? We could have used XML or CSV, but none of those are as good for a lot of reasons that are probably just my opinion. But that JSON is going to be a better format for us. So how do we get a session cookie set up? Well, I'm going to just save or git commit all that stuff, and let's convert this to a session. So I'm going to do this in a piece of middleware so that it's out of this one and only route. And we're going to parse my cookies up here, and we're just going to put this on request.cookies. And then we're also going to say request.session equals a decrypt of cookies.session. But we're going to try catch this like we did before. And if there's an error decrypting your session, then the session is just going to be an empty object. And then we need to set the cookie at some point, which I actually think I need like a weird hook for that. I can't remember. Express. Set cookie hook in middleware. Yeah, that's not what I want. I know it's in the source for Express Session. I know how they do it, so I'm just gonna go look at that for a reference. I guess they just overwrite rest.end. That's crazy. All right, well, let's try that. I've never done that before. And then response.end is my own function. And this is where I'm going to set our session code. I have no idea if this is going to work. And we're going to name the cookie session. It's a little easier to read. And then the cookie value is going to be an encrypted JSON stringify. And then over here, we actually have to decrypt and then JSON parse. See those two sides there? Right? When we write the cookie, we turn it into a string and then we encrypt it, and then we decrypt it and we parse it, and it should be back to an object. This crazy stuff is just about the fact that at the very end of the request, whenever the route's done, I need to hook into the just before we end the request so that I can set the cookie. There's probably a better way to do this, but that's what Session Cookie's doing. I'm surprised there isn't like a hook for that in Express. There's probably a better way, but let's see if this works. And we're still running. And we're over here. And, oh, not name. We want to stringify the request session. Let's try that again. Cool. All right, so then now when I submit this name, the name's going to come in. We're not going to put it here. We're just going to say request.session.name equals name. And then up here, oh no, this is to get the name. So we get the name from request.session.name, and then down here we set request session name to name. So in the get request for the home page, we're looking in your session to see if you have a name. And then when we do the post to set name, we're taking the name and we're setting it on the session, which should then be up after we redirect. As part of the ending of the request, we'll set that header.
Jared, do you mind just walking through the
Yeah. Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so the middleware is just a kind of a pass-through function that's going to happen before any request that's defined after it, right? So this function gets called before both of these requests. So the first thing we do is we parse the cookies. And then we attempt to decrypt and parse the JSON of the cookie. If that fails, we end up just clearing our session. Then we do this hacky thing where we overwrite the response end function, which is going to get called when the response is done and is going to be sent out. And we're saying, okay, before you do what you were going to do, this end function, we've taken that end function off, given it our own, as a way to do this before we call the end function the way it was originally supposed to be called. And this apply just makes sure that the value of this for the end function is response, like it would have been if someone had called response.end. So this is about making sure that the original end function is called exactly the way that it should have been called had someone said response.end parentheses, right?
Why do you have to do that? Like, why couldn't you just set the cookie before and set a call? Like, why
because this gets the cookie. Then we fall down to this route where I change the session object down here. Then after that happens, I have to stringify the modified version. I can't just set it first because it hasn't been modified by our route yet.
So it goes to that middleware, jumps down to the post.
Yeah, so
and then
this
comes back up.
this happens first, right? Then one of these happens, so one of these, they'll both be B, right? And then the end function is called. So when you say response.render or response.redirect, that tells Express to like package up the body, one of these different bodies, and then send back the response. And it uses .end to do that. And since I know that from borrowing this from another library, I can overwrite that and hook in and say, okay, at the last second before you send this response, make sure we update the new cookie based on however the session might have changed. Does that make sense?
Can you explain again the part where you're changing it back to the normal response end?
I'm not changing anything back.
Okay,
This is a little bit of a tangent about how this works in JavaScript, right? But if we have an object called response, right? And it just looks like this, okay? And we say response.end equals a function. And only thing I'm going to do in this function is log the value of this when I run this function, right? So if I call response.end, the value of this is the response object, which allows me to do things inside this function like say this dot whatever and get access to the response, right? But if I just take the end function off like I did, right, and I just call end, the value of this is now the window. It's now the global object. So I have to say end apply to response. And now that's what sets the value.
So I'm unfamiliar with that underscore syntax.
Oh, it's just I honestly I just did it because that's what they did in it's nothing special. It's just I could have just called it end, or how about we call it original end.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. The underscore was not special. That's there we go. Original end.
Use it so that you don't like reuse the variable.
The underscore thing is a loosely applied convention that really just means to communicate some sense of like private, or don't touch this, or don't modify this. This is internal. If you're using this API, you shouldn't be dealing with anything that starts with an underscore. It's something nebulous like that. So you'll often see some objects in JavaScript defined where there's properties, and some of those properties start with an underscore. And if you see that, it's usually meant, again, to say like, this is used internally, don't fuck with this. It's generally what it means, but it's not enforced by anything. It's not a hard or fast rule at all. Cool, so let's see if this works. So I'm gonna say Jared, submit this, and that did not work. So let's see. Let's look at our, we have a session cookie, looks pretty empty. I'm gonna clear all my cookies, reload, and I'm gonna put Jared in here. Still didn't work, but I do have a cookie, looks real small. So let's do response.session here and just look what's in there. And I also wanna look at my logs when I do this because I wanna make sure that I'm right about the order of operations. So we'll reload. A, B, C, undefined. Oh, because it's not response request, it's request session.
You're just console logging the screen.
I'm what?
Response in, just console logging the screen.
Console logging the screen. I'm not sure what you mean. Which line?
String.
On 24?
Yeah. I know. I know I'm logging that. I'm just, this came in as undefined, and I expected it to be our session, but I had the wrong thing. So I'm just checking that I used request session for everything, and I didn't accidentally do response session. Cool. So let's try that again. Let's clear this. We'll put in Jared. Cool. So we did get our session. If we look at our cookies, it still looks too small. So I'm going to look at what the stringified version of this is, just to see a request session. Let's clear that. Try this again. Certainly looks like some valid JSON. Great. Let's also log here. Decrypting cookie error. And I bet we're getting a decryption error. Yep. Error decrypting cookie. Reference error cookies is not defined. Reference error. Oh, oops. Because it's request cookie. So I actually just got an error on this line of code. I wrote this line of code incorrectly, right? Because I got rid of that cookies variable. It's now request cookies, right? So one of the things about a middleware that when you use a middleware to add functionality like this is very much like how session cookie works, right? In order to expose the things that we're decorating the request and the response objects with, or rather, in order to expose the work that we're doing in this piece of middleware, like decrypting the cookies and making them accessible to future routes and future middleware, is we have to put them on either request or response. So that's why I moved away from just a variable that was down here to putting the cookies on request cookies. Does that make sense? Yeah? Let's see if this works. Let's try this again. Oh shit. Okay, now we're hanging. That was weird. Why did I get 3 requests? Let's try this again. Yeah, something's wrong. And I'm guessing it's because of this thing that I'm doing. I wonder if I'm getting an error in here, and that's not popping up. So I'm gonna come in here and nope. If we look at the network tab, let's see. Error content length mismatch. That's interesting. That's an interesting error. So I'm guessing this little hacky thing that I'm doing requires a little bit more work to make it happen. So I'm going to stop doing this hacky thing, and I'm going to do, I'm just going to put this in a function for now called set session cookie header, which we will unfortunately have to call at the end of each of these things, which we normally wouldn't have to do. Does this make sense? Right? So like I want this piece of middleware to do this after hook for me every time, but I don't want to keep wasting time trying to figure out why this hooking into response end thing isn't working. So rather than doing this, I've made a method that just whenever you call it will set the cookie header with the serialized session cookie. And so anytime, it really only needs to happen here because this is the only time we're changing our session cookie. Who's lost? Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I guess I'm not fully understanding why you would even have the middleware. Like realistically, if you just have like a function system,
Yeah.
like what is the point?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. So the reason I moved to a middleware is because we never make websites where we only have one page. So
right, but
only
I guess
one
in
route.
This implementation, when now you're calling it these routes, isn't that counterintuitive to what the middleware does?
Yes, I would love to have this middleware do what it's supposed to do. I just can't figure it out. So I'm just going to switch this up so that this method would normally get called at the end of each request, but I have to call it now because I don't.
That would normally be happening in the middle.
Yes, right. Yes, but it would the middleware would normally add a hook that would cause this to happen. I just, for whatever reason, I can't. I think that's why the server's hanging. So let's figure this out. Let's see if. So it actually set my header. So let's go get rid of this cookie. and try this again. We have no cookies. And we're going to say Jared, and there we go. And so now our cookie looks like this. It's a little bit longer. And when I reload the page, so we can actually also, if you want to see the whole session, I'll take the entire request session and I'll also pass that into the view. And in Pug here, I'll put at the bottom of the page the request session so we can see what that looks like. Yeah? So that's the basics of how we create an HTTP authentication session. So now we can safely put things like user ID in here and whatever else we need to identify who you are. So let's do any questions or clarifying things about what we've gone over so far. Anyone feel lost?
So is the way that a session works generally is that, like, if you have it backed by a database and you have a password kind of hashed and it's sitting in the database, are you generally just passing around the username in the session?
Yeah. So
or the email or whatever is the like unique identifier of the user, and then it just hits the database every single time a request comes in and verifies that user's information and sends it back?
no, generally the way that it works, and we can do this, right? We can do a thing. So let's do app dot if we do a post to login, right? Generally the way that it works is you're going to have a form that's going to post to you something like you know, email and password, right? So you're going to get that posted to you from a form. Make sense, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to say something like one-way hash the password, and then query the database for email and hashed password. And if there's a record in the database that says my email address and the correctly hashed version of my password, right, then it comes back with my user ID and it lets me log in. So then when I come back with that query, so let's just fake it. So if I got a user ID back, then the request session user ID gets set to this user ID. Otherwise, we render the login form again, the login page with like an error that says like bad email or password. Something like that is how a login page is going to work.
Right, but then how do you verify that? Like,
right.
As
so now we would probably have another middleware other than the one that's just doing our session. We're going to have another one that's going to say, if we have a request session user ID, right? Then we're going to do database get user by ID for this ID. And then when this comes back with the user, and this is pseudocode, we'll just do request.user. Otherwise, we won't do that, and we'll just go to the next, or keep going past this middleware, right? So when you log in, we're going to put your user ID in the session cookie, encrypt it, and tag your browser with it, right? And now every request that comes in, we are decrypting that cookie, parsing it, and then if there's a session ID in there, we're going to go in the database and get the record for that user so that any of these routes down here can just say, is there a request.user? If so, then we're logged in. Otherwise, we're not logged in. And that's how all your routes will say, do this or that if you're logged in or not logged in. I saw a couple other hands when I asked if you were confused. I'm happy to walk through all this, any part of this again. Walk through all of it?
Can
Okay.
you post that code somewhere?
I could, but I don't really think anyone should use it. I mean, the way you actually want to do this is to use like a session cookie package or something like that. But yeah, I can walk through this again if you want. Cool. So when we come to this site for the first time, our request comes into our Express app and it first hits this piece of middleware. And we parse the cookies, which we don't have any cookies. So this just becomes like an empty object. And then we try to decrypt request cookie session, which is undefined right now, and it throws an error and it logs it. I believe we saw that. Here, let's try this again. I'll delete my session cookie and I'll clear the logs here. And I'll go to this app for the first time and we get an error decrypting cookie, right? We could probably handle this a little better, but we're just blindly trying to decrypt the session, even if there isn't a session cookie, right? So first time comes in, there's no cookies, so there's no session cookie, so we fail to decrypt it, so our request session just gets set to this empty object. Good so far? Yeah? Cool. Then we define a method on response that, when called, will write the cookie header for whatever's in our session. We're going to come back to that. So we can, if that doesn't make sense, we'll come back to it, right? So we're still talking about the first request where we have no cookies, and we're going to do this middleware. This is going to be false, so we're just going to go to the next thing. So that middleware does nothing. Our request matched this route, so we don't need this. So we get the name off the request session, which, if you remember, is just empty right now. So there's no name. And we don't actually need to call this. And we just render the page where the session's empty and the name is undefined. So that's why when we render this view, this is false, and we render the form, and then our session looks empty. Good so far? Cool. Okay, so then when I type in Jared here, and I hit enter, it does. We go through this all again. We come through here, and this time we have a cookie. And it gets parsed, and it's still empty because we didn't add anything to it, but it was serialized and encrypted and then deserialized and decrypted, right? Other way around. And then we get here, we still don't have a user ID, so this does nothing. And then we get to this route. And this route was given, and we can look at it over here. This is the post that we did. This is the worst. How does this get turned off? So crazy. Okay, this is the post that we did to set name, and you can see in our request headers, we sent our empty session cookie. Yeah? So then we also sent a post body of name equals Jared. So we take that name, we stick it in the session, we write the session, so this does the encryption and serialization of the session into a cookie. Make sense? Right? And if we want to review that, it serializes a cookie for the encrypted version of the JSON string of the session and sets the header set cookie. So you can see in our response here, we got a set cookie, and now our session's a lot longer. Right? Good? Okay, so then we set that header, and then we redirect to the home page. Okay, so now the browser does an immediate get of slash, so we start from the top again. And we go through and we have a session cookie, we successfully decrypt it. We get to this, we're still not logged in, this login doesn't work here, right? So then we totally skip this. And now we actually have a name. And so we pass in name and session, and that's why in the view, this is a true statement. So we say welcome back name, and we can see that our session has name in it.
Actually, the console.
You want to see what's going on in the console?
Yeah, you still have the A and B.
Uh-huh.
If you go to localhost 3000 / does it just do AB?
That's what I'm doing here, localhost 3000 slash.
Or you're doing localhost without the slash, right?
The slash and without the slash are the same
Well, I
route.
mean, in the console, should it just print AB and not AB twice?
Just does AB. Yeah. Yeah. You probably saw it too because it did a redirect, right? It did the post and then the redirect, right? So if we see that again by deleting my cookie, reloading the page, right? We get that initial decryption error, but now we have a cookie. We should, oh yeah, haha. This is actually why we do need this, right? We do need to set this because in the case that you don't have a session cookie, this writes the session cookie, right? So let's start over. I load this page. The first time I have no cookie, so we get that decryption error, but now I have a cookie so I can reload and it's just an empty session, right? So then I type, so let's clear this. I put Bob in here and I get ABAB because I did the post and then the redirect to homepage. So a post and then followed by a get. And that's the basics of a session. That's what session cookie does for you.
Does middleware generally always hook into the ends to the request document?
Probably not. I mean, most middleware, like body parser, for example, it just reads the body string, parses it, puts it on request.body, and it's done its job, right? So most of them probably don't, but it's an interesting case where we have where we create an object in a middleware and then later we need to use that object however it was modified.
Like it going back to it?
Yeah, like we need a before request and an after request middleware as well. But that's not how middleware works from my understanding. Yeah.
Is it like typical practice to like just create a cookie as soon as someone visits a website?
Absolutely. The vast majority of websites, if you go to them for the first time and you don't have any cookies from them, they're going to tag you with something, probably several cookies, right? Especially because a lot of sites will use things like Google Analytics, which is going to set its own cookies. And so you'll see if you go to most websites, you're going to get an array of cookies given to you.
Yeah, you talked about .m file before. Can you make like a very good example of how to use that? I've never seen it.
I'm out of time, but basically there's a .m package, and what it does is you make a file called .env. You can make this any file, and inside of this file you just put whatever as an environment variable and whatever value you want, right? And then these variables get sucked in to Node so that in your program, like for example, this password, let's say I wanted to have my encryption password or whatever this is to be some secret string, right? So I put this in here, encryption. And then in here, instead of this, I would do process.env.encryption password. So it just means that all of the protected content goes in this file, which does not get checked in. So if I'm working on this app and then I hire you and you need to get this app running on your machine, you're going to check out the code and it's not going to work because you don't have this file that wasn't checked in, and I'm going to give you a copy of this file in a secure way. So you and I have these secret keys, but GitHub does not have them.
But when you put something to GitHub, this is going to be there, only you have access to it?
No, this is not going to be checked in. So it's not going to ever go into source control, and it's not going to ever be pushed to GitHub. It's just not checked in. It's not hidden. It's just not, you explicitly put it in your gitignore file and you do not check it in.
Okay.
That's that. So in that sense, it's hidden.
Is that how it's usually used, or would that usually be in a database?
Nope, you don't put it in a database. No. Environment variables, this is the reason why in phase one I'm making sure that everyone knows about environment variables, because this file, it's called .env because it's loading environment variables, right? Another way to do this would be to go into my shell and say like export encryption password equals this, and then when I start my app, that's an environment variable, right? That is now in this shell, right? So that's how it works on Heroku. They set these environment variables for your database URL and the port you're supposed to run on and all these other things. So your environment variables define part of your environment and what you're supposed to do in different environments, right? So this is a way of saying, okay, well, I just want to put these in a file so my app loads them every time, but I'm not going to check this file in, and it's only for development, because in production you're going to put those in a different place to set your environment for your production environments. All right, that's it. Thanks, folks.
Make sure that was really helpful.
They see it, thanks.